This episode is for the absolute beginner in DaVinci Resolve 18. I'm going to show you how to edit your very first video. Let's get started. Okay, so here we are on our desktop. So we're going to take these videos over here and we're going to turn them into a little YouTube video. So if you haven't used DaVinci Resolve before, the first thing you're going to need to do is download the free version. So where you're going to find that is right here at blackmagicdesign.com. And you'll go over here and you'll click on products. And then you'll go down here and choose DaVinci Resolve and Fusion software. And then we'll select the DaVinci Resolve free. Okay, and then you scroll down a little bit and then you hit your download. Now, if you're using Windows, of course, you're going to choose Windows, but choose whatever operating system is appropriate for you. And then you're going to click the button. Now, if you're downloading the free version, it is a pretty high-end package. So entering your details to get access to the free version, I think, is completely worth it. And believe me, they don't spam you or sell your data or anything like that. So it's a safe thing to do. It's just for their own record so they can track who's using it and for what. That way they can build in better features in the future. So once you fill out all this information, then you would click register and download. Then your download will start, and then you'll wind up with this in your downloads folder, wherever that happens to be. You go ahead and install it, and then I'll meet you in Resolve. So when you first open up Resolve, you're going to get a screen something like this. Now, obviously, you're not going to have all of this stuff in there because you've just installed it. So in this case, I'm going to be doing a video for a client as part of this tutorial. I spoke to my client, got permission to use this as part of this tutorial. And that's something that you should always make sure you do if you're doing this kind of thing eventually. Anytime you're going to use somebody's material in your video, you need to get permission first. So just something to think about. Okay, so we're going to add a new project. Okay, so here we are in DaVinci Resolve. And this is usually the default screen that it will take you to. Now this is called the cut page. And the problem with the cut page, well, it's not a problem really. It's just when you're first starting out, it's probably a little bit more than you want to deal with. So we're going to stick basically with the edit page here. Now, I could take you through all the rest of the pages and introduce you to everything, but that's not what this video is about. This isn't like a full introduction to Resolve. I'm just going to take you through this very basic elemental skill of DaVinci Resolve on making your first video. And we're going to do it as easy as we possibly can. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is bring in our footage. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can do this, like many things in DaVinci Resolve. I think the easiest way is just to use your Windows Finder, or sorry, I come from a Mac OS world as well, so every once in a while you're going to hear me sprinkle in the odd Mac terminology accidentally. Please bear with me, or please forgive me for you purists out there. Okay, so we're just going to bring up our Windows File Explorer, not our Mac OS Finder. Okay, so here's the videos that we're going to be working with today. This isn't a video, this is just a template for the thumbnail I use for this client. So we're just going to select our videos, and we're just going to drag them in over here to our media pool. Now, in this case, I don't want it to change the frame rate because some of his videos are done in 29.97, others are 30 frames, so I just use 30 frame for everything. That's 30 frames per second. So I'm going to go don't change. And if you didn't have this window open, you would go up here and you would click on media pool, and that will open that up. This down here is actually your effects library. So, and that's how you would open that. If it's not going down all the way, it might be this button up here. So this will shrink it down and take up part of your your timeline. Now I've got an ultra wide monitor, so I can afford to always have this open all the way down, but many of you might not. So that's a good option for you. I just realized I forgot to turn on a little tool for my tutorial. I've been actually forgetting to use it lately. So bear with me for a sec. I'll come right back and I'll have this little highlighter thing activated. So just give me a moment. I've got our little highlighter here. So in case you weren't seeing it very clearly, that little button to expand and contract, this is up here. So I'm just going to leave this open and then open my effects library as well. So this is how I normally use my layout, but depending on the type of resolution you have on your monitor, you may have to shrink things down a little bit. So now that we've got our footage, now with this particular client, I know that these are essentially all in order. So I can actually just grab the whole bunch and I can drag them down to the timeline. Now, when you first drag something down to this timeline area, it'll create a timeline for you. And I've got defaults where I set up quite a bit of stuff automatically the first time, so you're only going to see it probably produce 2 video tracks and 2 audio tracks. Okay, so we've got all our footage here, and so the first thing that we're going to want to do is just take a quick look at each one. So I'm going to hit Shift Z on the keyboard, and that will zoom to the whole timeline. And if you hit it again, it'll toggle back to the setting it was at. You can also do this with the interface over here. You've got this little slider, or you've got these different zoom level buttons here that you can use. So we're just going to quickly move our playhead to the middle of each one and just take a quick look. Make sure there's nothing obviously wrong with any of the clips here. Okay. Now, the only thing that I noticed that could use a little work is color correction. Now, I know that color correction is a pretty scary idea for somebody who's just beginning in DaVinci Resolve. But as of DaVinci Resolve 17, they added an auto color feature, which 98% of the time does a really nice job if you're just doing basic stuff for YouTube and you're working with camera footage from your phone. It makes life easy. It's a simple thing you can do. If it looks really terrible when you apply it, just undo it. It's no big deal. So we'll take you into it really quick. So we're going to drop into our color tab. And if you look right over here, we've got this little A with a circle around it. So this is our auto color. Your keyboard shortcut for this is Shift Alt C. So you can do that as well. So we'll hover over this first clip. We'll make sure our playhead's somewhere in the middle and that it's highlighted. And then we're going to hit this little auto color or auto balance. Now, sometimes, depending on your system, it can take a little bit before it does it the first time. But every time you apply it after that, it's virtually instantaneous. So now if I just disable it real quick, you can see the difference it made. It just brightened it up a little bit and gave us a little more contrast as well. So we're going to do the same thing over here. Sorry, we'll just move the playhead. And once again, we can hit this. See how fast that was? Okay, that's all there is to it. I'm not going to show you how to do anything else on the color page. This was just the absolute basics to get you started. Okay, so now that we've done that, we'd like to do some kind of a transition between all these clips. Now you've got a lot of choices here. But one thing that I've learned from editing over the last couple of years is that less really is more. One of the first mistakes many beginning editors make is they overuse all these transitions and effects. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. When you're first starting out, you want to play with this stuff and kind of learn to get a feel for it. So I encourage you on your first video, maybe play with a few things, but once you're doing it for a while, try to be consistent. Less is more. Use the same transition in most places if it's appropriate for when you're transitioning between those clips. Sometimes you need something longer, sometimes something shorter. So what you would do here is you would make sure your effects library is open, and we're going to come down here and click on video transitions. Now you've got all these choices. And if you look over in this viewer on the right here, and you can see as you scroll or as you scrub along this effect, it'll show you what it's going to look like. So you don't have to actually apply it. You've got all kinds of interesting options here. You've got these different types of iris ones. And I'm going to zoom in on this. There's a few ways you can do this. You can use the slider here. I can use the Shift Z to go back to the previous zoom, but that's not enough. So I'm going to hold my Alt key down and I'm going to roll my mouse wheel. And this is going to zoom in a bit here. Now you notice that it didn't actually give us a transition here. And that's because you need to actually have some overlap between the videos. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this video and we're just going to overlap it. And let's say we want about a half a second transition. So we're going to go 15 frames at 30 frames a second, gives you your half a second. But we're going to go one more frame to make it even. It's to do with a kind of a, it's not a bug necessarily, but it's just in a way that it applies these transitions. Even numbers works a lot better, although it's not always necessary. And then we're going to drag this back to 8. So half of whatever we overlapped. So this will give us the same size overlap between the two. So now if we drag our transition to the little crack there, you'll see it pops into place. So then we can just move our playhead over and you can see we've got kind of this cross split thing here. So if we roll it back and forth a little bit, scrub it through. Now you can grab the playhead with your mouse and do this, but when you got the snapping tool on, it's going to kind of jump around. So if you want to do it smoothly using that, you can hit the letter N, or you can just turn it off here, and then you can roll your playhead back and forth, or scrub it back and forth. So now we can go in here and we can select this dissolve, and if we go over here to our inspector. And once again, if this isn't open, so you would just hit inspector, and then you'll see that the transition tab here is highlighted. So now we can actually make some changes here. We could reduce how many frames it runs across if you wanted to do that. You can change the alignment. So if you want the transition not to be across the two, if you want it to be at the end of the first one or the beginning of the second one, but in this case, we do want it across them. And then we've got some options we can do. So we can actually set a border. If we want a border on that, we can set a color, or we can feather it. So it's really up to you what you want to use. And then we've got easing. So if we play this, let me just back it up a little bit. If we play this, right? I mean, it looks fine, but it's very linear. So it starts at one point, it goes to the other point, and just like a straight line. Okay, nature doesn't normally work that way. So when you have a linear transition, something in the brain just knows that something's not quite right. So it actually feels better when you make a little change. So we're going to go in here and change our easing. You've got some choices. You can have it ease in. That means it comes in slowly and speeds up to the end. You can have it ease out, which is the exact opposite. In and out will give you slow to in, fast in the middle, and then slow to go out. And then you've got custom. So if you hit custom, then you can customize your curve the way you want it, and you can do keyframes and all that kind of stuff. But that's way beyond what I'm trying to show you here. So we're just going to go and do an in. An ease in, sorry. Now we'll see if you can spot the difference. So see how it just kind of started slow and then got fast. That's the absolute bare bones basics of doing video transitions. I'm actually going back to the beginning of the video, so I'm going to zoom out to my timeline, go right to the beginning, And now I can add something in front of all this without having to move all this stuff and, you know, manually move it around. There's a really easy way if you want to add something, like if you want to insert it as opposed to overwrite. So you would just put your playhead right in the spot you want to insert it. So in this case, it's going to be right at the beginning. The first thing I need to do is get this clip out of my power bin that I'm going to add. So here we are. We've got our intro for Nathan. So I'm just going to right click on it, and then I'm going to choose insert selected clips to timeline. Then you'll see it added in right here. So now we're going to zoom in. Now you could try and hit your Shift Z, but you notice it's hardly doing anything. That's because for some reason, I don't know if this is supposed to be a bug or a feature, but I find it really annoying. But anytime you bring in a new file or like text or something like that, it completely resets your zoom that happens when you hit it's annoying, but kind of just the way it is. So I'm just going to scroll again with my middle mouse wheel and my Alt button, and then we're going to now, instead of just grabbing the one clip by clicking on it and dragging it over, that's going to separate it from the rest. And if you don't want to do that, you can actually, I'm just going to click off of anything. So you can actually hold your Alt key down. If you're on a Mac, it's your Option key. And we're going to hit the letter Y. So Alt Y, and that selects all the clips to the right of your playhead. So if we actually Shift Z out of this, to zoom all the way out, you'll see they're all selected now. Okay, so we're just going to grab this and we're going to drag it, and we're going to move it 2 seconds and 2 more frames right there. And then we're going to bring it back 1 second and 1 frame. This is so that we can put the transition in the middle. So all I'm doing here to kind of scroll the timeline with my keyboard and mouse, I just hold the Control key down and I scroll my mouse wheel. You can just grab it here and move it, but sometimes it's just more convenient to do it this way. So now we're going to take this transition that I built for this client in Fusion, and I'm going to drop this on, and we'll stick our playhead in the middle. Now in my case, I'm going to add some sound. So we're going to go up to our common power bin where I keep a lot of this stuff I use across multiple projects. So there's a couple of things I use here for this. Oh, got to turn our snapping tool back on. That was just the letter N on the keyboard. So there's my 2 little sound effects. Oh, something else I forgot to mention that you are probably going to want to do just to speed things up on your system a little bit. We're going to go to playback. I'm going to come down here to render cache, and I'm going to turn it to smart. And then you'll notice this little red line appears with it turning blue. So when it's done turning blue, that means it's done kind of pre-rendering this, so it'll play back smoothly. That's one thing that for some reason you always have to go turn it on manually most of the time. I've tried setting it in the user presets, but it almost never loads it. So just go turn that on before you kind of start doing anything. So now we can just do a quick test, make sure it's working fine.
We're just on our way home from a cooling.
Okay, so that looked just fine. Now I'm just going to do a couple things real quick. This isn't necessary for you to do, but I do this to stay better organized. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to right click on these different audio tracks, and I'm going to change their colors just to help me stay organized. So there's a lot of stuff that you can get into and make changes or change options on by using that right mouse button. I'm also going to rename these audio tracks. So this one is our main dialogue track. And this one is for our sound effects. This is actually a secondary sound effects channel that I can keep at a different volume level. For sound effects, I want to be much quieter than the main ones. So this will be SFX2. I mean, you can name it whatever you want, doesn't matter. Okay, so let's zoom back out here. So now we've got all these other videos here that we could put transitions on, but the first thing we want to do is just kind of scrub through our video and cut anything out of it we don't want. So that's kind of the next very basic elemental operation you need to know, is how to actually cut this video. We're going to scrub along our timeline here.
Sure, I'm just going to show you a few things. Like what.
I'm going to pause it here, and I'm going to find the spots I need to edit, and then I'll bring you back and show you how to do the actual cuts. Okay. All right, we're back. So I've gone through and scrubbed through the footage and found a few things that I want to show you how to do. So the first thing we're going to talk about is doing our basic fast transitions here. So like I said, the one that I particularly like to use is the smooth cut. So it's one I use heavily. It's actually my default. One reason that I use it a lot is when I'm doing tutorial videos, there's a lot of things that I have to constantly cut out, you know, pauses and clearing my throat or sneezes, coughs, whatever. Stuff that you normally are going to edit out of a video. But when you're doing an awful lot of that and it's a talking head like this, people are going to notice much easier. So a smooth cut will kind of morph from one to the next and hide that cut most of the time, or make it so that it's almost unnoticeable. So that's why it became one of my favorites. One of the reasons. There are others, but we won't get into that. So in any case, if we're going to use this as our transition, you notice we had it over here before under our video transition. So we've got smooth cut. So you can drag that onto your transition, but you'll notice that once again, because we haven't overlapped them, it won't put the transition on. However, once you have it set up as one of your default transitions, you can come to this spot here between the two. You can right click and I can tell it add a 4-frame smooth cut, and then it will come up and ask me, do I want to trim the clips to apply the transition, which you would say yes to. And that can save you a ton of work if you're doing a lot of these. So, and the reason that you can save so much time, because you don't have to do them individually. Now this is a trick that even a lot of experienced editors don't know about in DaVinci Resolve, so you're going to like this. So if we actually come in here and we select all of these videos, but I'm not going to select the very last one, and I'm not selecting this front one, and I'll show you why in a minute. So what I'm going to do is go over here back to where it says smooth cut, and I'm going to right click. And now you see this here where it says set as standard transition. If you want this to be your default, you can set that, but we're not going to do that for you at this point. So we're just going to say add to selected edit points and clips. Okay, it's going to ask you the same question, so I'm going to go trim clips, and now it's added to all of them. To do this with what I'm trying to show you here, if you want that specific customized version of that particular transition, so I've got a customized version of this that's the 4 frames. So if I scroll down here a bit, I've created this user one. So all I did was I added this transition. I set it to what I wanted, and then I right click on it and save it as my default. Okay. And then when you go to operate it as a default, then that little menu that I showed you where I could choose 4. So it basically goes a little bit on each side of the one that you set up. So I set it up as 4 frames, and then it gives me the choice of 1, 2, 4, or 8 on its own. But in any case, to do this, applying it to multiple locations properly, we're going to go down here to where I've made this smooth cut 4 frame, and we'll right click on that one, and we'll go add to selected edit points and clips. Trim clips. Okay, so now we should be able to zoom in. Zoom into this one here. Okay, now you'll see it's got them in the middle. Okay, now I'll show you what this looks like on the video.
And I'll pretend I know more, but I won't. So now we'll show you some other stuff after. So here's another.
So short and sweet, just a nice little morph from one video to the next. So this is one I use an awful lot. Now in this particular video, I don't necessarily need any text for anything, but I'm going to show you how to add text. It's really easy. Once again, we're going to use our effects library here. So we're going to go to where it says titles. And then we've got all these different kind of pre-done title examples. But if we just want some plain basic text, we can just grab this one that says text. So I can bring it out, drag it to where on the timeline I want. Unless you've gone in and changed it, this will default usually to, I believe, 5 seconds. So we're just going to zoom in on this a bit. So now that you've got text selected here, we'll go up over here to our inspector. Once again, if it's not open, you just hit your inspector here. If you want it to go down full screen, you got the same extra little expand button here on the right side. So we can expand that down to the bottom. Okay, so we would just come in here and change our actual text. Let's actually get rolled over that tool on the timeline so we can see it. Put in any text you want. And then we've got some options here. We can choose our font, or we can change our options here. So if I want to make it extra bold or italic, I can do that. I can change my color. And you've got some other options. If I want to add a little outline on the text, I can increase the stroke. If I want to add a drop shadow, I can do that right here. Now, if you want to set a background for it, that's kind of cool. I use this quite a bit. So the first thing you do is adjust your height so you can actually see it. And in my case, I like to use this as a kind of a bottom or top bar. So I'll actually expand the width to just over 1. Set my corner radius to 0, and then I can adjust the position of that bar behind the text, so you can kind of get it set the way you want it. You can also change this color. You can set an outline as well. So if I wanted to make a white outline on that, set my outline width, so you can do that. And then if I move my text, everything follows with it. So if I go up here to position on text, I can just drag it to wherever I want. So I could put it right at the bottom like that, just hide that white line on the bottom, and we get that effect. Now, if you want to add extra little bit of juice to this, there's actually a really easy way to animate this off and on the screen. It's so easy. So once again, if we go to video transitions, now I've created some user versions of this, but I wanted to show you the original one. So just bear with me for a second while I find it. There it is. So under motion, you've got the push. So we're going to grab this and we're going to drag it onto our text at the one end. Okay. Now in my case, I like to do this very quickly. Well, once again, I'm a less is more guy. So I'm going to select this transition here. Now I can do it right here, or I can come up here and do it. In my case, I'm going to just double click on that, and I'm going to manually type in 4 frames. Sorry, not for this. 7 frames is what I use. My apologies. Okay, so let's zoom in a little more here. So now, right now, you'll notice on the default it's got push left. So if we were to actually go back and scroll through that, you can see how it's pushing it to the right. I know it says left, and this has been a thing since version 16, I think. The up and down is correct, but left and right, you got to swap them. So go figure. Anyway, we'll make sure that transition is selected. We'll go over here and we're going to go push down. So it's going to push down to its final position. And then we're going to set our easing. So we're going to ease in. Yeah, we're going to ease out, sorry. And then I want to set a motion blur, because when you've got moving graphics, you normally get motion blur, like your eyes will see it as motion blur. So if you don't have motion blur, it once again, it kind of hits that weird part of the brain. You know something's not quite right. So we're just going to put a very tiny bit in here. Let's see what 0.2 looks like. So yeah, that's a fair amount of motion blur. That might actually be too much. So let's actually try cutting that down to 0.05. Okay. Yeah, I think that looks about right. So once we've got this made, we can select this again. And I just need to expand a little bit bigger, just so I can grab it easier. So now we're going to just go, I'm going to get rid of my playhead because that's messing me up. So I'm going to click on this. And I'm just going to hold my Option key down, or sorry, my Alt key. Sorry, too many years on a Mac. And we're just going to drag this. Now it doesn't look like anything's happening, but it is dragging. You see it shows up when we get to the other end. We let go of the mouse button, then the keyboard. And then we'll select this and we're going to change it to push up. And we're going to change it to ease in. Okay, so now if we play this, you see it pops in from the top and then it's going to zip back out the top. Just like that. Now to really sell the effect, we're going to add a sound effect. So let me drop this little whooshing sound on here. And once again, we're going to do the same trick. We're going to hold the Alt key down and, oops, sorry. I gotta hold the Alt key down first, then, what? Oh, I see what's going on here. Something weird was going on with the mouse and I just wasn't picking up on it. So you'll see these settings here. Got some different options for what we want the cursor to do. We want arrow selected for this. I'm surprised this actually worked for duplicating this one. Okay, so we'll try this again. So we're going to hold our Alt key down and we're going to drag it. There we go. Got a copy of it. Okay, so now we'll play this again real quick.
Small site, we got some logging happening.
So now it kind of sells the effect and it brings the user's attention. And that's a really easy way to add an animated text onto your video. And then what we can do is we can click on that one and then we can control click this one and control click that one. We'll right click and we'll link the clips. So now if I zoom back out and if I grab this and I move it, it brings the sound with it. So I can just easily move this to anywhere else on the timeline I want to. And if I want to duplicate the whole thing, you can do like we did before. We just hold the Alt key down and then drag a copy of it. So you can do this for just about anything. So instead of having to Control C and Control V, you can just use this. It's a lot faster. Okay, so let's get rid of this stuff real quick because we don't actually need it. And we're going to do a couple of cuts. So I've got a couple spots here. Now, if we zoom in, zoom out a little bit here. Okay, something I want to point out, most smartphones, when you are using the selfie camera, or the one that faces you when you're looking at the screen, it will flip the image. So when you're actually viewing it, everything's reversed. So we want to fix that. And so somebody says, well, fix that in post. This is what they're talking about. Fixing something after the fact. So we're going to go in, we're going to select this. Now I've already cut it off of the main footage because he was able to, on Android phone, you can switch from the front camera to the back camera without stopping your recording, which iPhone could do that. So all we do is we I'll show you how to actually cut stuff in a second here, but I've already cut this out of the video and we haven't removed it or anything. So we're just going to make sure it's selected here. And then over here, we've got some of our tab options. We're going to go and click on video. And then right here where it says flip, I'm just going to flip this horizontal. Now he's on the proper side of the vehicle. And I think there's a spot right at the beginning that I need to actually cut out. Oh, no, it's not this one. Okay. So let's go to the next one here. Okay, so we've got this little bit where he's got his hand in front of the camera. So we want to cut that out. So we get our playhead to exactly where we want to cut it out. And we've got some options. Now, of course, I've got an editor keyboard, so I can just hit a button, but we're not going to do that. So if we hit our Control B, we can cut it. Or let's just get rid of that. We can also go up here and click the little razor blade, and then right where the end of the razor blade is where it's going to cut. So let's just move the playhead. So you see that really fine red line? So that's actually scrubbing through the video right at where it's going to cut it. So we get it to where we want it, and then we just click the mouse. And then we can go back here and click on this little arrow. There is a keyboard shortcut to do that. I just never remember it. Okay, so once we've got that cut out, we need to do what's called a ripple delete. So what that means is we've got two different ways of deleting stuff. If we just hit the delete key, or sorry, the backspace key, if I hit the backspace, it just deletes it, but doesn't change anything else. But if I hit the actual delete key, not the backspace key, so if I hit the delete key, then it does what's called a ripple delete. So it deletes it and then moves everything over in its place. Okay, so just like that. And then we can reapply our transition. You would probably have to go drag it in again if you haven't set this up. In my case, I'm just gonna add it back in. Okay, so now we've got that cut out. And poof, we go right into him just a split second before he starts talking. Okay. And that's really the basics. Okay, so you go through, you do all your cuts, and once everything's cut the way you like it, then you're gonna render it or deliver it. Now, I've got a lot more work to do before I actually deliver it, but I'm just gonna show you how to do that, and that'll be the end of the tutorial, and then I'm gonna carry on and finish this up for my client. I'm gonna be doing stuff for the rest of it that is beyond the scope of this tutorial, but we will get into that kind of stuff on the next video. So, or at least the next DaVinci Elements video. All right, so all we do, once we've got all the edit done and we're happy with everything, sound effects are added, and maybe you've added some music or whatever. So we're gonna go to the Deliver tab. So the first thing we have to do is tell it where we're gonna put it. So in my case, I'm just gonna pick downloads because this is just a sample and you don't really need to see where I store everything. And you name it whatever you want. And we hit save. So now you see it's dropped in the name and the location here. So now you can pick your options. Now, if you're just starting out in this, you probably don't know what any of this stuff means, and that's perfectly fine. If you're going to be uploading this stuff to YouTube, these are probably the ideal settings for YouTube. Okay, so we're going to go down here. We're going to pick MP4, and it's defaulting to H.264, and you can choose H.265. What's the difference? Well, the difference is .265 will give you a smaller file size, but it loses half the color information. Probably better if, when you're first starting out, just do it as H.264. YouTube is going to compress it to its own WebM format, most likely anyway. So now You're also going to want to set your resolution. Now my default timeline is 1440p, but if you this particular client, we just output everything in 1080p because that's what he takes most of his video in. So I mean, you can transcode it to a higher resolution, but why bother? Plus, if you're using the free version of DaVinci Resolve, you won't have those other high resolution choices for rendering. You can work with high resolution video, you just can't output anything above 1080p with the free version, at least to my knowledge. So we're going to go down here, we're going to choose the 1920 by 1080, which is your basic 1080p. Our frame rate, we don't want to change that, just going to leave that at 30 frames per second. And everything else on here we don't need to worry about right now. We're going to go add to render queue. Right, and then over here you'll see that it's added it to our list. So all we do is we go over here, we click render all, and it's rendering. So it's got an estimated time of about 2.5 minutes. I think our total video is 18 minutes or something. I'm going to be editing that down a fair bit, but that's where we're at right now. It's done rendering, and you can see it completed in 2 minutes 33 seconds for an 18-minute video. That's not bad, but I mean, your mileage is going to vary based on the hardware that you're running. Let's take a look here. So here, of course, is the DaVinci Resolve that we downloaded. Oh, now we'll just check the video. There we go. Looks like it's all playing just fine. And this is something you always want to do, is make sure you play your video locally before you go and upload it. There's been a lot of times where I've caught something.
We're just on our way home from a cool adventure, and
there's been a lot of times where I've caught something that I had already fixed, but somehow got broken when I was maybe hitting Control Z a couple times to undo something, and you do it one too many times. So, you know, stuff happens when you're editing a big complex project. If you enjoyed what we did today, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. That really helps us out a lot. And if you don't want to miss any videos, make sure you hit that notification bell. So thanks for hanging out with us today on DaVinci Elements. We'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.